Hello.
Well, hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to that Christian Nerd channel. Thank you so much for joining me for this part two response to Little Light Studios talking about the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Basically, the Little Light Studios is very influenced by this satanic panic separation theology kind of rhetoric, and as such, they want to, or they do view the MCU and other things as well as satanic, as very problematic and these sorts of very unfortunate things. So, before I bring on my guest, whom you met in the last live stream on this topic, I just want to mention real quick that I am continuing excuse me, sorry, that I am currently researching for a presentation that I am doing for class on religious trauma. So I made a video about that today, which you guys can go check out on my YouTube channel and other platforms. But I will be giving an update video about that once I actually do the presentation and the classroom discussion happens and stuff like that. Um, that said, though, I am starting up classes, right? So that work is going to become front and center as opposed to the stuff I am doing for content. However, the articles about evolutionary creationism, as well as other articles that I have in mind, and some of the videos I mentioned, like the next video in the biblical slavery series, for example, talking about the actual slave laws in the Torah and other things will be continuing to come out. So I will do what I can to uh, definitely make sure that all those things come out in somewhat of a timely manner. But we will see what happens there. That said, let me go ahead and bring on my guest. This is Kentario or Christ X Comics. Love, love that. That is great. And Matt.
Hello again, Izzy. Hello again, Christy
Hello. How are you
Comics.
guys doing?
We're good. We're good. This is a blessed
Good.
time.
Yeah, I'm
That's good.
ready.
That's good. Yep. Guys, in the comments, let us know if the audio or the video is doing well. Make sure you can hear it or anything like that. And so, real quick, so far we have seen that Blue Light Studios is failing to engage in a good basically interpretation of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. That's that's basically the point that we're trying
To
to
put
make.
it nicely.
Yeah. I used the analogy last time that if the Marvel Cinematic Universe was text, they are fundamentally misrepresenting it, misinterpreting it, much like they we would say have the scriptures
Hmm.
in several places, and unfortunately will continue to do so. So, um,
That's why we're here.
that said, however, before we dive in, do you guys have any initial comments or anything like that before you want to start?
Yeah. So, I just want. We already know who the missing hero is, but feel free to play the game anyway. Find the missing
Yes.
hero. Find out who it is. I bet you can't guess. And also, I want to reiterate the comment that I made at the end of the last video because it's going to become especially pertinent when we get to Black Panther. Spoilers ahead. That the way in which the story functions, you need a plethora or a plurality of villains, of gods, of these other chaotic agents that all act independently in order for the hero to come and restore order or restore peace.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now,
Those are
Definitely.
my those are that's the initial thought.
the only thing I'll say is let us I know we're definitely addressing some of the issues that they're pointing out, and I know that the people here aren't doing that. But we do want to go ahead and make it stated that let us not use this as another cause for division within the body, which is a lot of what people do with this type of thing. They say, well, if you like this type of stuff, then you're probably not actually following God, or if you choose this stuff over sacrificing this thing, then you're risking your salvation. And we don't want to make this another dividing tactic simply because we like this stuff and we're advocating for it, we're speaking up for it. We're not even trying to do that. We're trying to be fair to the content, even if we never have watched a single Marvel movie to begin with. We're being fair to the content. That's the main goal of this, and that's what looms over the church body's head anyway from the world, is we misrepresent and misinterpret a lot of different things, which hinders us spreading the gospel anyway. If we better understand the context of whatever it is that we're speaking for or against, then that's where we have the most impact.
Yeah, that's totally fair. We did not mention that in the last live stream, but yeah, it would be important to say that, like, I mean, if you don't want to watch a movie, in which case, in which there is a giant panther god that does something for the African people, I mean that, you know, what I'm saying that's totally on you. It's your conscience. You're allowed to do what you want. What we're saying is that there is a certain kind of theology that is motivating the interpretations that we have here of the MCU, and these interpretations are bad and simply used to justify that kind of movement. And we want to say there's a difference between this and your conscience saying I'm not comfortable with Deadpool and Wolverine, I'm
Yes.
not comfortable with Black Panther, that sort of thing. So yeah, definitely. With that said, let's go ahead and start. We are going to start with the Avengers Age of Ultron. We touched a little bit on their take on Guardians of the Galaxy, but they they do not do a great job with that, let's say.
No.
But I thought we could start kind of brand new, so to speak, with a new section of their video. So
Oh boy.
let's
Let's
go
do
ahead
it.
and take a listen.
Stories. Avengers Age of Ultron. Similar type setup. You've got some ultimate power that was created, and the ultimate power that was created is this being, this digital being called Ultron. And he's actually created to be a peaceful being and to cause peace in the universe.
What is this?
Hello, I am Jarvis. You are Ultron, a global peacekeeping initiative designed by Mr. Stark.
This feels wrong. I'm a peacekeeping program created to help the Avengers. I don't get it. The mission. Give me a second.
Peace in our time.
Lucidchart makes intelligent diagramming easy and helps your best ideas become real.
I knew I was gonna get him. I knew he was gonna get him.
Once again, another parallel that's happening here.
On that poster, since Iron Man is the one like Christ, look at his hands.
Exactly, and he has something on his hands. Wow. I mean, that's something I didn't even notice before, but yeah, you're right. He has these marks on his hands and he shoots light out of them. I mean, we know Jesus will have the marks forever in his hands, even throughout eternity, for us to remember that by. So yeah, very interesting that you pointed that out.
Okay.
Oh.
We're off to a very, very bad start here, ladies and gentlemen. So I want to teach you guys a new term. Okay, maybe it's not new to you. I don't know, but there is something called a false equivalence. This is a cognitive bias and informal fallacy that occurs when two things are treated as if they're equal or significant when they're not. And this is exactly what Little Light Studios is doing. It should be obvious that there is a massive difference between what Iron Man has on his gauntlets, not even his hands, his gauntlets, that use repulsor technology to stabilize his flight, which he literally says that's what they're for in the first movie, and to create offense, which he uses later on, and the holes in the hands of Jesus that were created as a result of his crucifixion by Romans. obviously,
Completely different.
Not,
they're completely different. Um,
but not as obvious to
Also,
other people, it seems.
also another quick side point historically. I don't blame them for thinking that Jesus was pierced through the palm of his hand because that is what translations seem to imply, and that's what a lot of Christian art says. But crucifixion, that's not how crucifixion worked probably in Rome. Most likely people were crucified and the nail was driven through the wrist here. Because as you can feel, there are two bones here and they come together here, right?
Mhm.
And so it
Yeah, I
would have
was
been
about to make
better
that
to,
point. Yeah.
yep, it would have been better to puncture through here so that the nail can stay on and they can't pull downward. They won't fall down. Because if they
Right.
would just put through the meat here, it could flow through the knuckle and fall and
No,
slice
that's absolutely
open
right.
the hand
Yeah.
instead
Yeah.
and fall over. So that's probably what's going on there. He was crucified through this part, something like this anyway. Um,
So
so
Spider-Man.
there, in order for their connection to work, he has to be pierced through the hand, which he probably wasn't. So, and speaking of translations, the reason why they probably say hand is because Greek and Hebrew languages just weren't as precise as English languages. So they didn't necessarily have another Greek or Hebrew word for finger, palm, wrist, elbow, or whatever. Rather, hand could probably refer to the top of the fingertip to even the bottom, like around this area, around the elbow.
Oh,
So that's probably what's going on. So
interesting.
immediately
That's not something I
we're
knew. That's actually
starting.
fascinating.
Yeah.
So
So
interesting.
immediately we're starting on the flawed footing.
So Spider-Man. That
Still
what you're saying?
Spider-Man, yeah. The the webs
Yeah.
to the yeah. Yeah.
He
That's
connects
great.
himself to the people. It's obvious.
Oh,
That's the
I can't.
interpretation ability that we're dealing with here. Also, just another again, Iron Man is not a kind of Christ. Just throwing that out there. He's never portrayed as such. We
No.
addressed this in the last live.
Hmm.
So, and we argued that he's portrayed more so as a redeemed sinner than if we're going to use a Christian lens to interpret these films, which is a question in and of itself. Are we supposed to be doing that? But aside from that,
You got a
yeah.
point.
So, yeah.
So Ultron is the ultimate evil in this particular series. Here's when the Marvel characters are actually meeting Ultron for the first time.
So, question: Ultron is created a certain way
Yes.
for peace, becomes evil. What's the explanation?
That he basically saw everything that everyone was doing, and he then thought that the path to peace was literally to exterminate these people.
So, in other words, he thought that he had a better way than the Creator,
Exactly.
just like Satan.
And very
Okay. The Bible does not say that Satan had a better way of doing things than God did. Now, in
Right.
classic Christian Satanology, he just fell because he wanted to be like God. That doesn't necessarily mean he wanted to do things like you don't know the plan of Satan. Okay. And I don't
Right.
understand why Christians say that, or why Christians will talk as if they know the thoughts and plans of the devil. When they don't, there's
Right.
not a lot in scripture and they don't have the spiritual ability, let's say. Secondly, an interpretive issue here, they're assuming a classic Christian Satanology and probably would rely on texts like Ezekiel 28 and Isaiah 14 in order to even say those things about the devil. Whether or not those verses actually say anything about the devil is a very important question, because they don't. I would argue that they don't seem to. Ezekiel 28 will probably be the closest parallel, where Eden, the Garden of God, a tree, the cherub, and all those stuff, and all that stuff is mentioned. But Ezekiel's probably tapping into a tradition that's a little different than what's going on in Genesis. Also, like Ezekiel, even in that description, has material that's not found in Genesis. So he's probably doing something else. So that is a question in and of itself. But yeah, that's not the devil's story.
If I were to, I'm probably going to use the term incorrectly. If I were to say anything about Ultron's mentality, it goes back to what Iron Man reflects, that of a human's development, even up to the point of giving their life to Christ. He's at that point, however, going in the opposite direction, seeing the state of the world, that what would be better for that would be its ultimate destruction, tapping into a bit of a nihilistic perspective. But this is basically the flesh functioning without the spirit, almost, if that's a good way of putting it. You know, he doesn't have the conviction of the Holy Spirit or the law of God that is driving him when it comes to those types of decision making. He can look at that, but he doesn't have a spirit to connect with that, to thus drive that type of decision making that he's going off of, because he's really just looking at blueprints and saying, this is what I see, I'm gonna go based off this is probably the best resolution. Sure, he demonstrates emotion, sure, he demonstrates wisdom in some areas, sarcasm, all these different emotional plays, but he really doesn't have a soul, I guess you could say. Soul is probably better than spirit, a soul to really drive those decisions. Because even a non-believer, as the word says, the laws are written on our hearts, so that includes them to an extent. That's why they're able to exemplify God's morality without having a faith in him. And so that's what he's lacking, and that's why he draws this conclusion.
Right, and as you were talking, I just thought of this, that the march towards progress for Ultron doesn't necessarily have to be one of compassion or empathy. And that's on Tony Stark for not, I guess, programming him correctly. But this idea of just Darwinian survival, that does bring peace, because there's only one of you left. Unless you want to fight yourself, then the words of I don't remember who it was that wrote the I think it's literally just called The Antiquities, and it's a huge, giant, multi-volume history of Rome. And the author says Rome, you know what I'm talking about. Yeah, the author says it might even be Josephus. It's probably not Josephus. Livy.
I don't think it is.
Livy said that Rome conquered all the world and created desolation and called it peace.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The Pax Romana, right? The peace of Rome.
Yeah.
All right, let's continue.
Very interesting that it's the Marvel universe that created him. So that's a very Gnostic theme. When you have these demiurge, all these little sub-gods, and they created a god like Sophia, and it was Sophia that was the evil god and was the one that was cast out. They're flipping the model upside down. This is coming at you from a very Gnostic perspective.
Okay. There's a lot to discuss here, because they don't bother to explain what.
Well, we can't have it both ways. Little light. It can't be like both Satan and Sophia. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry. I just want to lay this out there, because to be fair with the both of you, as much as I do this type of content, I don't have the book knowledge that these two have. For the audience that is listening to us, I don't have that knowledge. So I'm gonna speak as a person that doesn't have that intel. Them having said that, if I was trusting them to give me improper information, that would have led me astray. I already know that they're misapplying it, but someone who doesn't know, then hearing that immediately could be led astray and just quote them when they go to speak on this type of thing based off that ignorance. And that's the part that really kind of shocked me. Speaking to people that don't know, that's even scarier now, because you're misleading them. But you guys bring the clarity. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, that's a totally fair point.
Yeah,
so,
I just said that. Yeah. Did you hear? I know that we were talking over ourselves for a second. So did you hear it?
Say it again. I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
So the so Gnosticism is a movement, a very like vague movement in some ways. You almost have to put like another term in front of it, like Jewish Gnosticism, Christian Gnosticism, and that sort of thing. But we use that term to designate um, uh, people who believed primarily two things: this sort of dualism at display between light and darkness of some kind, or spirit and material, and um, people who believe that the material world is in some way inherently evil or wrong or problematic in some way. And at least in Christian Gnosticism, Jesus comes not to necessarily to save us from our sins, but to reveal the spirit within us, the divine spark within us, and at some point set us free from this corporeal mess, so that we can be intertwined back into the fullness of the pleroma, which is these sort of deities that exist. And so um, so if we are going to read this creation of Ultron as a Gnostic thing, what they're trying to say, what they seem to be saying, is that Ultron is Sophia. Sophia was a god who was created by the Pleroma, according to the Apocryphon of John. And Sophia is the Greek word for wisdom. Like Paul uses that term. The Greek translation of the Old Testament uses that term. It just doesn't mean what Greek philosophical concepts and what later Gnosticism thought. But in Gnosticism, Sophia is the personification of wisdom itself. So Ultron then would be Sophia. The Marvel Universe would be the pleroma of the gods who made her. Um, Now, immediately there's an issue. Like Ultron's kind of a dude, sort of. Like he's literally voice acted by a really good male actor. Like I don't.
Right.
But beyond that, he's not all wise. Like it's a classic setup in media to have the hero believe the truth or the facts or something like that, and then the villain to believe a lie. And in this movie, the Avengers are the ones who believe the truth, i.e., that humanity should be defended and this is not the path to peace, like
Right.
the Romans thought, for example. Ultron is the one who believes the lie. And I would actually say that in some way makes him foolish. And so this is not Sophia. Also,
Right.
the Marvel, it's such a weird thing he says. The Marvel Universe, whatever that even means, did not make Ultron. It was literally like Mr.
Right.
Fantastic wasn't even involved. It was only Tony and Bruce.
Right.
It was two smart dudes.
Right.
So interpreting them as the pleroma and the fullness of deity is weird.
Yeah.
Is really weird. I don't know why he would do this. And also, we also have to think about this. Gnosticism thought that the material world was inherently problematic. Like the demiurge, the dumb deity, created the material world according to some Gnostic traditions. But here Iron Man is creating material.
Right.
Right.
Well, all that Iron Man and Ultron conceive of is material.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow.
They
Yeah.
don't believe in us like an afterlife or anything. Well, I guess they believe in something supernatural because Thor is, but even that's a kind of material in the Marvel universe.
Yeah, I mean Thor is a dude. Like you can touch him, sense
Right.
him, feel him, all that. Yeah, like he's not a spiritual being. So the gods in the Marvel universe are not spiritual beings. And so like to say that they have Gnostic tendencies here is really weird because it's the exact opposite. They're trying to make good material things, and Iron Man and Bruce had good motives, right? Which was to create peace. It's the Hulkbuster armor in the same movie. material that
Right,
stops
right.
the Hulk from rampaging.
Yeah.
Right? So, this is a very, very weird thing to say about the MCU, especially as a whole. Very weird. But yeah. So enough about Gnosticism because it's not even really all that relevant. Let's go ahead and continue.
So here they're meeting Ultron for the very first time, and listen to the verbiage that is even used in this scene.
I'm on a mission.
What mission?
Peace in our time.
I'm on a mission, peace in our time. So his ultimate goal is to create peace.
How could you be worthy? You're all killers.
And his pathway to peace, he believes, is to wipe out anybody that is fighting on the other side of the fence, right? Now, why is that significant in a Christian worldview?
Christ is going to come back with fire and destroy the wicked and reset up a kingdom of perfection, right?
Because just like Ultron, right here, right? Sin is infectious, infecting the entire universe, right? So how's God going to deal with it?
Destroy it.
He's going to destroy it, right? That is a crazy parallel that is happening even in here.
Interesting.
Okay, I think it'd be a more fair representation of Ultron's view that weakness is infecting the universe, or vulnerability is infecting the universe, not sin.
Yeah, there's no conceptualization of sin, and that becomes that becomes part of the problem with the way that they're reading this. They are trying to. This is just full of false equivalence. They are trying to equivocate, make equivalent religious terms and categories to something non-religious.
Right.
Without any good hermeneutical steps made to cross that bridge. So it becomes immediately problematic to say, Ultron is like sin in that he's infecting the universe, which he's not even infecting the universe, he's infecting technology.
Right.
Like he spreads his AI consciousness across technology. One of the best cartoons, superhero cartoons you will ever watch is Avengers: Earth's Mightiest Heroes. That cartoon slaps. Please go watch it. But look at their interpretation of Ultron as well. He does that same thing. He spreads his consciousness across technology, and that's why he's able to take over the Shield helicarrier in that film, in that TV show, and do these other things. So, secondly, like there is some sense in which a Christian could agree with Ultron, not in its entirety, but like Paul seems to affirm this connection between sin and death, and that all sinners, as a result of Adam, die. Right? And then we see, for example, in Genesis 6, that the violence of humanity got so bad that God did conclude that they needed extinction, or near extinction. I don't take a global view of the flood, but that's a whole other topic. But God does conclude that we need to do something about these humans because of the violence and the wickedness, kind of like Ultron concludes. The issue, however, is that violence is in the domain of God. It's not in the domain of, for the most part, not in the domain of humans, and especially not the domain of machinery. Right. That's the if you want to have a Christian perspective on this, that's the mistake Ultron makes, is thinking that he can do this. In a similar way, like if you guys have seen Death Note, in a similar way, in a similar way that Light Yagami makes himself into a god. Why? How? Because he judges the living as some of the living as those deserving of death, and has the power to deal out that death, when in fact even a really smart teenager should not have that power. This is God's domain that you're encroaching on, and it only makes sense then that Light Yagami and Ultron die and fail in their mission, because this is not your domain to cross. And so
does Ultron.
Yeah, it's even debatable whether or not it's the domain of the state to cross to decide whose citizens live or die.
Right.
Whole other ethical issue. Not trying to get into that. I had a whole presentation in our class on violence today. It was a whole thing.
Oh.
Like violence in the Bible. It was a whole thing as like an example of what to do for our presentation for class
That's
and
so
ethical
funny.
issues. That being said, though, that would be a more appropriate Christian interpretation of Ultron. Not that he's God, but rather that he's the villain who believes he can encroach on a divine domain, you might say.
Right. I suspect they're going to get into this later. I just want to be sure that I don't miss the opportunity because he will quote Noah's flood at some point. Ultron does quote that. And so the thing to distinguish with Ultron is that Ultron has knowledge. He doesn't have understanding. As a matter of fact, when he took out Jarvis, he took out his understanding or his opportunity to get an understanding because he was asking all of these questions back to back, and Jarvis was trying to bring him down so they could talk about it. But they never got to talking about it. He just went off of what he was seeing and the information that was being bombarded on him at once, and he moved off of knowledge. And that's how that led to his destruction, just as that's what led to our own destruction. Knowledge of good and evil. We got that access. Our eyes were opened. We didn't know what the heck to do with it. And we still don't know what the heck to do with it. We're still trying to figure it out. But that's why he says, in all thy getting, get understanding, because that understanding is far better than the knowledge. There was something else I was going to say with that. Oh, it was this. I'm not saying that Ultron is like the devil, because I do believe he's more of a representation of our wickedness running amok. When we look at our own sickness, how we want to address that, the conclusion we may come to is that death is the only option. But the thing about that is that we end up doing what the devil himself does to try to even deceive people, and that is to pervert what it is that God already understands because of our limited knowledge. We think, hey, I think I'm going to do it this way because I think this is the best way that I can do that thing. God has a better, more effective way. But we make up these perverted ways of doing that. Creating the Tower of Babel, God acknowledges man's imagination and their power when they come together as one. But to draw closer to God, one, they were seeking to draw closer to those false gods. But even then, they were doing it in a way that was not a way that God wanted the people to draw closer to him. So it's a perversion of what God is looking to do. You brought up Noah's flood, and what's powerful about that is, sure, he brought the flood to destroy. But what is more important to recognize from Noah's flood is he brought the flood to redeem or to save mankind, not simply to destroy mankind, which is the loss on Ultron's part due to his lack of understanding.
Yeah, I was gonna make that point. I'm glad you made that
fair.
point.
That's totally fair. Yeah, we do see that the flood acts as a new creation because the world is submerged underwater, just like it was in the chaotic state that it was in Genesis 1, 2 through 3, and then of course that the waters, recede, right? They go back to where they were, kind of like how the waters are being separated from the land in Genesis 1. And then, so there's a sort of new creation happening with then Noah becomes the sort of new Adam in a way. So that, yeah, there's a lot of parallels there, and you're right. There is, it has served a redemptive means and a rescue means as well as a sort of destructive means. And the rescue part is kind of what Ultron is missing out on, for sure. So, flawed perspective, they're not representing God as evil. That's basically the point we're trying to get at. so
we've used an honest literary analysis to get down to what Ultron actually represents. This is us dealing with the text as it exists, not trying to make 60,000 views so we can sell you our cheaply made documentary.
Yeah. Yep.
Like, I'm assuming these are his warriors that are crashing through, and it's like everybody winds up looking like Iron Man. It's like they're created in that image. Like, this is as good as it can get. You're duplicating that model.
Right. There's a lot of biblical terminology that is thrown out here, and you will see this, but I want to read to you Psalms 85:8 says, I will listen to what God, the Lord, says. He promises peace to his people and his faithful servants, right? The Bible describes God as being the instigator of peace, right? We're engaged in a war. We know that there's obviously a battle going on, but God is the God of peace. So listen to how the event.
Okay, yes. So God is, to fill out the picture a bit more, God is called a man of war and a God of peace. And so there are these paradoxical, contradictory representations of God. I think they fit well together. I simply think that this is part of the whole picture of God. But yeah, they are. God is described in both ways. Um, but like also, um, like yeah, God wants to bring peace, duh. But also, but like, so should any decent human being.
Right. Yeah.
Like I brought this up in our last live stream. Like God, Jesus in the form of Jesus tells us, be peacemakers.
Mhm.
Go
Well,
make
blessed are the
peace.
peacemakers, right?
Right, blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall inherit the earth. Right.
Mhm.
So, if you want to have a weird Christian reading of Ultron, then you can say this is his weird attempt to fulfill the command of Jesus.
Yeah.
But of course, a weird attempt, but still. But they don't obviously go in that direction because it's not beneficial for their reading. But like any decent human being should want peace in our time. It's just how that gets achieved, by whom that gets achieved,
Yes.
how that peace is maintained is all very complicated.
That
And we
kind of
saw that,
matters. Yeah.
yeah, and we saw that in Rome. And how peaceful Rome was.
Mhm.
So I just think it's so weird to jump immediately to God without saying, well, this is just something people want. Is peace.
Right.
Right.
So yeah.
Avengers talk with Ultron, and you'll start to hear some biblical terminology.
How is humanity saved if it's not allowed to evolve? There's only one.
Uh-oh. Evolve. Evolution. He said it. It's a biblical term.
Oh
He
That's
my!
said it. He said it.
Oh my
Okay, I'm
gosh.
sorry. I had the joke. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's warranted.
Path to peace. The Avengers' extinction. I had strings, but now I'm free.
So, an interesting scene. He's basically saying there's one path to peace, the extinction of this group that's kind of like the rebels, right? So to say. And
No.
What? They're
No.
they're
What?
not the
No.
rebels.
Yeah, they're gonna keep saying this too, because they're gonna say like Guardians of the Galaxy are the rebels, the entire Avengers squad are the rebels, like the entire MCU heroes are the rebels, and
Is this Star Wars?
like it
Like, what are we
starts
talking
here.
about?
Yeah, it starts here, and I didn't make any sense to me because what?
So the reason I
It's not
think,
an institution that they're fighting.
yeah, yeah, I think the reason why they came to this conclusion is because of their interpretation of Ultron. They're trying to say that Marvel depicts God as the villain. And so
Yeah.
if they're fighting God, then whoever is on the opposite side automatically becomes the rebels. The problem is that, as we just established a little bit ago, Ultron's not God.
No.
Nor is he an institution. Like he's
he
not President Ultron.
right. He's not. They're not rebelling against the state. But
Yeah.
Well, hold on. Now that I think about it, I can't remember what source this was from. I think it is from. I can't remember this. Y'all know it once I say it. That Jesus is also Satan. They're one and the same, and God is evil, and then Jesus is looking to take down quote unquote God.
That almost sounds like Jehovah's Witnesses.
There's some religious belief that holds to this.
Well, I've heard people try to argue that Jesus is Satan because Jesus is called the morning star in the book of Revelation, I believe. but this is just a confusion. The Latin Vulgate, when the Latin Vulgate translated a Hebrew word in Isaiah 14, they translated it as Lucifero, which means something like morning star in Latin. Isaiah 14 gets interpreted as being a reference to Satan, thus the popular name Morning Star Lucifer gets attributed to Satan. But all of that is extra biblical development. It's probably Isaiah 14 probably has nothing to do with the devil, but just a prideful ruler who's getting a talking down to, let's say.
Well, see,
But
what's strange is that, so we know they call Iron Man the Christ-like figure, but now if they're trying to say Ultron is God, then I can't remember what this belief system is, but if that belief system holds, then what they're actually doing is they're trying to say that Jesus, the Christ-like Iron Man, is coming against God, the evil one, which is
yeah,
Ultron, and which we know is a false interpretation of Scripture. But nonetheless, that's
yeah.
what they seem to be playing off of.
Yeah, it's really weird. I do not get this, but yeah, let's go ahead and continue.
They kill him, he dies, but really he goes into everyone else. Now, speaking Christianity, right? God is literally, he died, but he literally is going into his followers, right? We're supposed to open our hearts and invite Jesus into our lives.
This is such a crazy false equivalent.
No.
Like Ultron's consciousness going into technology, not in everything else, whatever the heck that means, into technology, is not the same thing as opening up your heart to the Lord. Even just the way I said that is different, because notice I said my opening up my heart to the Lord. That implies agency and choice on my part. What choice? But an AI that's not a robot, that's not conscious, that's not moving, has no agency or any choice. The consciousness just gets spread out to other technologies. And also, can we just say that these other technologies and these other things are not Ultron's followers? They become taken over by Ultron. Like that's it's more of a if you just want to say this, I'm not actually saying this is true. I'm saying a better parallel would be demonic possession. If you just want to go there.
No,
because
fact. Well,
they're actually taking, because Ultron again is taking over what's already there. And so it's this is so bad.
I'm just in shock. I'm gonna need an Advil.
This is your equivalent of when they said that Jesus is the Walking Dead from the last video. I still can't get over it.
Oh yeah, bro.
Yeah.
Oh man, yeah. Yeah, they said, yeah, dead man walking. That's kind of like Jesus or something.
No!
It's literally not.
No.
It's kind of the exact opposite. Oh man.
I don't know if we'll get to it, but they even say that, like at the end of like this.
Oh
video,
really?
They even talk about how, because they'll talk about how like we serve the living God. What? Yes. I'm glad you got that right. It only took you an hour to get there.
Yeah. So weird.
So once again, another interesting kind of parallel. Ultron says something right here in this scene that you might find very biblical.
Upon this rock, I will build my church.
So,
I mean, yeah, like that's a valid point. Ultron has a fascination with human religion. I think it's part of. I actually don't know why this is the case. I don't know if that's a carryover from the comics or why he has this fascination in the film. It might have something to do with the fact that he just likes it. It might literally just be that he likes this human convention. It might be that the movie is I don't know this for sure because it's been a minute since I watched this movie, to be fair, but it might have something to do with Ultron's mission in some way, shape, or form. How these sort of religious ideas ring similar to what he's attempting to do, although again twisted and bad and not what Little Isus is making it out to be.
So he was
So
built by Tony Stark, who isn't afraid of using biblical language to describe his creations. So what are the odds that his creation would
yeah,
go on and make biblical references?
Well, it was actually pretty well placed now that I think about it, because that's when he bought vibranium, which vibranium metal technically stems from rock. So hence, upon this rock, I will build
yeah.
my church. And what he goes on to do is to build his new body, his indestructible body. And we know that the church is a representation of the body, which is a temple. So he is playing off of that in that statement.
See, that is a much more sensical interpretation of what's going on than anything I've heard of it so far.
I did this full time.
Yeah,
That's it. That's what I
You
do.
kind of just made that up. So I like
Hey, don't do it like that, bro.
they sat down and thought about this. You didn't even have that in your notes. I just want to note that.
So true.
Look, man, I'll be on my P's and Q's. I'll be ready for this stuff.
No, that actually makes a lot more sense. Yeah. But yeah, he does have a fascination. I know when I watched the movie, I enjoyed that. I don't know. I liked his fascination with
Same.
religion, but anyway.
Upon this rock, I will build my church.
Fit in this movie.
Right? Who said that?
See, they're asking a good interpretive question. How does that statement fit into the context of the film? Do they answer that question? No, they never answer that question.
Kentario answered that question for us.
Yes, yeah, he answered that for us, but the people who made the point do not answer their own question.
Oh man.
Who said that?
Jesus Christ.
Jesus Christ, right? And I say unto thee that thou art Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. So very interesting, the very line that Jesus uses is used here. And Ultron meets up.
Can I also just say that just because someone quotes, I mean anything, any text, but also, and especially the Bible, just because someone quotes it doesn't mean that they mean what the authors meant when they wrote that. Like, that should be obvious to anyone who's listened to Christians talk about the Bible. Like, we're not always using it properly.
Oh my gosh.
But especially in Marvel films, like what makes you think Marvel would pay attention to the original context of Matthew 16? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So the text is being used for the readers, in this case the creators of the Marvel films, own purposes rather than the authorial intent of the text. And I think that's important, because you can't, to then read the authorial intent into something with which it wasn't trying to attain the authorial intent would be a miscommunication, essentially. So, and I think that's what they're doing here.
Generously put.
Yeah.
Up with his people that he's trying to deceive, that are part of the Avengers side. And they're meeting in a church. Very interesting, right?
Did you know this church is in the exact center of the city? The elders decreed it so that everyone could be equally close to God.
I like that. The geometry of belief.
Very interesting. Wow. He's sitting on a throne in the very center of church, and that.
What's on his head?
And that's how you get close to God. He's kind of got like a towel shawl thing over his head.
Almost like the Jews.
Right?
Did he say almost like the Jews?
That's what I heard when I
heard so.
it.
Do the Jews wear anything like that?
I mean,
they do in the Jesus movies.
Well, yeah, but like not really. Like it's not. It's like, looks like this red cloth that's just kind of long and over his body. Doesn't it just fall off too when he stands up?
Mm-hmm.
It's probably, but they're probably just misapplying it.
Yeah.
They're probably misapplying it. Yes.
Ultron is a Jew. That's what we got here.
Oh God! Don't put that on, boy.
We're getting banned
Oh
for that.
boy! Don't do it, man. Don't open up that can of worms.
You know, very interesting, sitting on a throne. So listen to the language that's still being used.
Is that why you've come? To end the Avengers?
I've come to save the world.
So when he's asked, why have you come? Literally come, right? He was created, remember? But why have you come? That's language that's used in heaven. And
What? What do you mean that's language that's used in heaven? Okay, so anytime there's a Bible verse where it says someone is coming, that means they're like Jesus, folks.
Man, I gotta be careful when I text my mother, hey, I'm coming home from work.
Yeah, we all know only Jesus has two comings.
There is 1,817 verses that use "come" in King James Version.
It's funny that you looked it up in the King James version because I'm pretty sure they are using the King James. So they literally could have just Googled this in 5 seconds. But like, why is that significant? And especially in the context of the film, he literally did he literally did do that. He literally came to save the world according to himself. Like like that's not an issue.
Yeah.
Again, he has this false narrative in his head that he can do this, or that he even should do this, and he's wrong. This is why the Avengers defeat him.
Exactly.
He's wrong. He's not God. That's kind of the thing.
Bad guys be bad guys.
Right. They're not representing God. He's representing a false view of himself and how he should conduct himself in the world. That's ethics. So, man.
And he says, I've come to save humanity. That's the very idea of Jesus, right?
Yeah.
In fact, the devil doesn't want to save you. He wants to destroy you. So you can't fit that model into the devil.
You're halfway there, buddy. You are halfway there.
Oh, man.
Maybe you can't fit the Jesus model either. Okay, I'm sorry. I will continue.
Now, this particular character, his name is Vision, and the Avengers also create him. They give him life. Listen to the language that's.
Do they? I forget exactly how Vision is
Really
created.
deceptive.
Yeah.
Right. So Vision was created because he had made his perfect. Ultron made his perfect body, but the Avengers showed up and took the body, and so they went to go basically finish the process. But he got the Soul Stone.
So Tony and Bruce kind of fix his mistakes and then use the Soul Stone to. Okay.
Exactly.
So it's not entirely accurate that this is that the Avengers created this basically.
Oh Lord.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Used in this particular scene when he meets the Avengers for the first time.
You think I'm a child of Ultron?
You're not?
I'm not Ultron. I'm not Jarvis either. I am.
Kind of interesting that here once again we see the same phrase, I am, and you'll notice this kind of pop up with a lot of them, right?
Yeah.
What is I am?
It's God.
The name of God, right? When Moses asked, what am I supposed to call you? He said, I am that I am, right?
Okay.
No.
Anytime in Scripture someone answers a question by saying, I am, they're claiming to be the one and only God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob.
I could just be.
I'm not just answering a question. I am.
What are the odds of him meaning that's me? Like,
Yeah.
I'm myself.
And also,
Oh my God.
like you can tell you should be able to pick up in his tone of voice, in his cadence, just by that scene that he's not sure.
Yeah.
Like he's stumbling over the question. That's why he repeats himself, which we often do. We often go, because we often, like, if we don't exactly know the answer to a question or we're thinking about it, sometimes we'll talk ahead of ourselves and stumble over our words. And like, yeah, Vision wouldn't know who he is. Because he was made, he has the soul stone in him, but he was made from Ultron, who's evil, and the Avengers trying to figure out what's going on here, and they had a hand in creating him too. And then he just began to exist. So, like, yeah,
yeah,
like, who are you? Is a perfectly valid question.
Who are you? Well, who am I? Yeah.
Yeah, and so he's because okay, I shouldn't have to explain this to adults. The way it's not it's not just what you say, it's how you say it. Okay, he says the phrase with confusion, suggesting that he doesn't know. It's that simple, which is why he stumbles over his words. And obviously he's not God.
No.
He dies later, just so you know.
Right.
Does not come back. I don't think Vision has ever come back yet, except save.
WandaVision, but
Yeah, but
WandaVision.
that's a whole weird thing in and of
Yeah.
itself because she's warping reality. That's not.
No,
That doesn't count.
yeah.
He came back one time.
Did he?
Remember, Wanda killed him, but then Thanos brought him back.
Oh yeah.
Oh, hey.
Yeah.
So he died twice. In that
So
one.
he did have a resurrection. Okay. That's see, it's all coming together.
You got us.
Well, guys, y'all remember what I said earlier about Ultron? Ultron is making these decisions, lacking understanding, but he's also lacking a soul to be able to direct these motivations. And that's where we do see the complete opposite with Vision. Vision has this same access to knowledge, but he is motivated and moved with an influence of the soul. So that's why he moves a bit more cautiously, even in saying I am. Like, he's not totally convinced of his own perfection just because he has all knowledge. And so that's something to really do point out about him. It's more so a reflection of us wanting to at least draw closer to better. And I will give it that much. I won't say draw closer to God, but I will at least say draw closer to better. And sometimes that does result in us drawing closer to God to have that better.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So before we leave, this is
ahead.
Izzy. This is what you set me up for. Thank you. So that's when God answers Moses and he says, "I am that I am." According to the podcast Lord of the Spirits, go listen to it. The authors point out that I am that I am is told to Moses because God doesn't want to give Moses his actual name, the YHWH, because he doesn't want Moses to think he can control God by using his name in the same way that other pagan priests and other pagan kings would use the name of their gods in order to rope them into whatever thing that they wanted.
Yeah, which is a fair point. I mean, that happens in later texts as well. The name of God is invoked in and well, also Solomon in some way is mentioned and invoked in order to exorcise demons in Jewish exorcisms of the first century. Even during the time that Jesus was around, they would have been using exorcism techniques that they claim came from Solomon. And that because there was a whole tradition at the time that Solomon that developed that Solomon had the ability by the wisdom given to him from God that he could control demons. And so we find these things, and Josephus in his Antiquities of the Jews actually explains a Jewish exorcism that he watched where they put something on the nose of the possessed man that I believe had the name of God on it. And so yeah, the kind of stuff would have been invoked to do that. And I think we do find stuff similar to that in the ancient Near East. And so that is a pretty important historical background point, is that if God wants to make the point that he is sovereign even over the gods of Egypt, right? Because the Exodus is a fight against the gods. It's not just against the Egyptians, and that's actually stated in Exodus. And so if he wants to make the point that he's sovereign over those things, then it would make sense to answer him in a way that does not give him his name, but still shows perhaps who he is in some way. So Yeah, that's a totally fair point.
Right? And so here he's saying, I'm not a child of Ultron. Listen to the verbiage that's used there, right? We are the children of God. I mean, even the way that they refer to people who follow Ultron is like what God's followers are called.
Or like what you call anything that you create. Like literally, we will call anything that we create our child. It's like a man when he calls anything that he likes baby or girl, like cars. Like it's almost like that. Like yeah, if I created that thing, that's my child, so to speak. And that doesn't that doesn't have to be used literally. I don't understand.
If I make 2 cars, then I have my first Adam and my second Adam.
Yeah, a Christological reading of cars. Yeah, that's what we need. Oh, I can't.
Right? So also here he's sitting there describing what the plan of action is to beat Ultron. Now I find this very interesting. Listen to this.
I don't want to kill Ultron. He's unique. And he's in pain. But that pain will roll over the earth. So he must be destroyed. Every form he's built, every trace of his presence on the net.
So what did you just hear?
He didn't want to destroy him. He wants to destroy everything that he stands for.
The image of him, right? He wants to utterly change every form, every thought, every idea, because that's the ultimate way to destroy someone, right? Even if they're there in your presence, but to destroy who that image is to people, that's the best way to beat them.
Because it turns your opinion of them, like, so now the whole world is coming against this person because they believe that their character's twisted, you know?
But it's exactly like what the devil is doing with God, right?
Yeah,
in the Dark Ages, the devil knew the more Christians he killed, the more they popped up, right? So all of a sudden he goes, well, I can't just kill him.
What? Yeah. So this is the part where I said to myself, guys, y'all need to get humbled by a book that I have still not recovered from called Symbolism.
Bring us on. They need to bring us on.
Oh my goodness.
Please,
y'all need to
Matt.
read this book called Symbolism by Johann Moeller. I have still not recovered from this book. It will humble you as a Protestant. You need to read it. All of you, go read Symbolism by Johann Moeller, and you will see that maybe Protestantism isn't the end-all be-all of the Christian tradition.
I'm going Amazon card right now.
It's free. No. Contario, don't buy it. It's free. It is free on LibriVox.org. You can listen to it as an audiobook or you can read the PDF. But it will humble you. I will never recover from this book.
That's great. Okay, there's a lot to cover here. Firstly, again, misinterpretation. They are misinterpreting what Vision said.
Mm-hmm.
He said, first off, he does want to destroy him. If you're going to destroy every ounce of their presence, you are destroying them. Okay? Like, that's not...
Right.
It's not the image of him, it's him. Okay?
Yeah.
Secondly...
Almost as though he's a digital being, so digital beings have to be used to achieve digital ends. What are the odds?
Yeah, right. But also, he says, like, every fabric of his presence on the net, right? Like, every part of him that exists on online in AI and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense in the context of the film because he has spread his consciousness to these other robots and to these other things. So in order to make sure that Ultron, the bad guy, does not get to continue killing people, innocent people, because he's not God, they have to destroy every amount of him. It's like I mean, it's same in concept, it's not same in execution, but it was similar to what Goku had to do to kill Majin Buu. Like, if
Right,
he
right.
let even an ounce of whatever that purple substance was, it's
Yeah.
gonna multiply and come back and start
Mhm.
busting planets again.
Right.
So Goku had to bust him, basically. Um,
Yeah.
and basically at that point, it's not killing so much as making sure they cease to exist in all
Yes.
forms.
Right.
Um, that's what needs to happen. Also, so that makes sense in the context of the Avengers film. That has nothing to do with the image. They're not just killing the image. They don't just need to destroy the image. They need to
Mhm.
destroy him and everywhere he has been.
Yeah.
That's the point. It's also has nothing to do with ideals. Like, Ultron's
Yeah.
not convincing any humans to join him on this
Right.
crusade to eradicate humanity. Like,
Yeah.
he's not killing what he represents. It's him. It's
Mhm.
Right.
like just defeating Ultron. Now you might say, why do they need to defeat Ultron? Because Ultron has a flawed idea that's leading him to kill innocent people, which is why he needs to be stopped. So you could
Mhm.
say that, but he's not. It's not necessarily a killing of the idea that he represents. Um, that's a weird take. Also, the Dark Ages is a myth. We need to stop saying that the Dark Ages was ever a thing. The church people never stopped engaging in science and scholasticism. Okay,
Mhm.
Mhm.
this is a really weird thing, and I don't. And why would you pick the Dark Ages as a time where the devil is at work to kill the church? Like,
Yeah.
especially if you're Little Light Studios and you're Protestant and Little Light Studios, because you're probably gonna think that by the point of the Dark Ages we're getting Catholics, like we're starting to get to a Roman Catholic thing. So you even have to ask yourself if you think they're saved during this period of the Dark Ages to begin with, to
Right.
for there to be some sort of satanic attack on the church. um, Now we here at Discerned Nerds, me and the other person who created this sort of Facebook group with me that you two, thank God, are a part of. Uh, we take an ecumenical approach, so we think the church never died and that it has always consisted of the Protestant, Catholic, and Orthodox uh, churches. Whether or not every individual was saved is not what we're arguing, just that the institutions, the
Mhm.
churches as such are Christian churches, even though we can disagree. So that's our take. So we can actually say that there was some kind of satanic attack. How do you know there was a satanic attack? Like, there's a whole host of questions here that
Yeah.
they don't bother to answer.
And
So
why is it uniquely satanic back then and not uniquely satanic now?
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, it's a whole everything is wrong.
Because all of a sudden they're repopulating like crazy. What I can do is destroy the image of God in them. And he's taken over Christianity and twisted it, right? So
Okay, so apparently Satan started his work in the Dark Ages to destroy the image of God in the church and thus twist Christianity into something that no longer resembles Christianity. Maybe that's the Roman Catholic Church. I don't know. First off, if that would be the claim, it's not. Secondly, um, and we didn't lose the church to the devil at any point in time for Protestantism to restore it to us by God's grace, and prophetic witness. Um,
No, I
but
take back what I said about recommending symbolism by Johann Muller. Y'all aren't ready for it.
y'all are ready for it. Yeah, they're not. Yeah, yeah. But um, uh, the other issue at play here, again, aside from the ahistoricalness of all of this, is that now, if you guys disagree, if other Christians disagree, that's fine. I have a theological disagreement here. I don't think the image of God is ever lost in someone.
Oh, not
I
ever.
don't care who they are. I don't care if they're Hitler. They are in the image of God because the image of God refers to the function that corporately humans play in creation. And you can check out, I mean, there's a lot you can check out for that.
Mhm.
Dr. Carmen Imes has a book called Being God's Image. Wonderful work on the image of God from a scholarly perspective. Go check it out. Great stuff. There's a lot of things you could go to for that, but the image of God is about the function we play.
Yes.
And that function, that command from God, is never lost. And it also speaks of our value too as human beings. That in Genesis 9, for example, that the death penalty, you might say, is given out if a human murders someone because they're made in the image of God, right? James says, out of one side of our mouth we bless God, and out of the other side we curse those in the image of God, right? The idea being that you should not curse those in the image. So it doesn't matter if they're a non-believer. It doesn't matter if they're a filthy, dirty non-believer. They are in the image of God. That's never lost. You might say they begin to fulfill the function more. You might say that they, through Christ, engage in what it truly means to be in the image for the new covenant believer, going into the new creation where we will be deified. But it's never lost at all. And it's not about ideals. It's not about rationality. None of that. It's about the function humans corporately play. So, yeah, a lot of questions here. I don't know why they think. I mean, why would they even think that Satan has the power to take the image from us?
I don't.
Like, why would they even think that?
For the world, that perception makes sense because they're ignorant of the relationship that the devil even has to God, and I think that's a huge thing too. Is understanding that whatever the devil does, the devil don't do without God's permission. Like he's not like sneaking around and God don't see him. God knows everything the devil's doing.
Yeah.
And so when he does, God's like, yeah, you can do that. That's cool. And so like when that's misunderstood, that the thing is there's the deception of making people believe God doesn't exist or God has been eradicated, but actually being able to do that, as Izzy's saying, is impossible. He can't actually do that. It's not gonna happen.
Yeah. So we're getting closer to the hour and 30-minute mark. Do you guys want to try to finish just the Avengers section and then call it, or how do we want to
finish this?
Okay, I'm down with that.
So I found this pretty interesting that this is literally the devil's plan to destroy God's image in your life. Now,
no. You don't know if that's the devil's plan.
Right.
And the image of God cannot be destroyed in anyone.
No.
So,
listen to this even.
When the earth starts to settle, God throws a stone at it. And believe me, he's winding up.
What? Did you say God throws a stone at it?
So he's referring to a prophecy.
Okay.
I mean, that's what happens in Daniel. There's a great stone, like a mountain, that comes and destroys the image that Nebuchadnezzar dreamed about, and God set up that was representative of God's kingdom being set up on earth.
So it will literally, prophecy, literally being spoken right here, saying that a stone is going to come and destroy this kingdom, right? But I found it kind of interesting because, all these little phrases and everything, these words all go into everyone's mind. Mm-hmm. In fact, that was the whole reason we made that documentary about how your mind works called Pseudology, right? If you understand how the brain works and you sit in a dark
oh my God,
room in a theater,
hold on, one second.
Open your mind as wide as you can open, all those words go in there and they stay in there, but you don't think about them. So putting words in people's minds that go and view these movies saying that, God's just gonna throw a stone at you and destroy you is a slam on God once again, right?
No.
Go ahead, Matt.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so the small nitpick before the big rant. Ultron had just got done talking about how the dinosaurs were destroyed. He's not making a reference to prophecy. He's talking about a cosmological event that destroyed the dinosaurs.
Really? That's hilarious.
Rise forth.
That's hilarious.
Yeah,
Ultron
put two and two
evolutionary
separated
idea
that
of
out.
strongest of the fittest. Oh my gosh. And
that's funny.
Oh my gosh. So here's where we might have a little discussion as artists is after my time at art school, I became exceptionally skeptical of the idea that our entertainment educates us or that like we learn lessons from movies like this. I started to think to myself, well, all of this stuff that you're putting around yourself, this is just reinforcing your own ideas. Like you're not going out. Well, in Chicago, it was Chicago type movies and a lot of art house, crazy wild movies. Anyway, they weren't going and watching Pure Flicks and then suddenly becoming convinced by a God's Not Dead movie. They were watching the crazy movies and just feeding themselves the craziness and giving them and becoming just more crazy, or at the very least reinforcing their own ideas. That's also true of when you watch Avengers movies or the Marvel Universe. You're just choosing entertainment that connects to you. And you don't criticize, say, Captain America when he conforms to your own ideas. Rather, when it's a lot easier for you to poorly criticize the other characters of the Marvel Universe when you have something that you want to sell.
Yeah, exactly.
That's that is actually crazy. And yeah, like they don't this is kind of why I mentioned like in our private chat group when we initially started doing this, like part of me just doesn't want to go back and watch all these movies over again to find the original context of all these statements so we can deal with them.
Yeah. Because it doesn't
But
matter. Like, and this is even crazier. This is escapist fiction. This, like, the superhero comics came out of, well, ultimately Superman, but Superman came out of the classic pulps of the early 1920s when people were going through things like the World Wars and the Great Depression and wanted to take a break from their lives. It's not that deep, guys. It's okay.
Yeah.
It's entertainment. It's about restoring peace and order to a chaotic, well, quite frankly, antagonistic world.
which
Now-
is kind of what God does.
Yeah.
Now, I will say, and I want to speak on what Matt spoke of fairly to Matt. Yes, and it started out that way of the escapist mentality, but let's say once we got to the point of World War II with everything that was happening, and then we see how they're portraying Captain America just dominating the enemy. Once the military got their hands on the Captain America comics, the military was actually frustrated and angered by that because it's giving this false depiction of what's happening in reality. And because of
Really?
that, that's where we actually see a shift in comic books to where
Oh.
they start to actually incorporate a lot more realistic experiences for the sake of
Oh.
properly illustrating what's taking place. Sure, they played on the fantasies, but they actually wanted to incorporate reality for the people, because otherwise, like we see with Marvel tries to do these new series and these new spins. Guess what? Their audience pulls back. But as we see with Deadpool and Wolverine, they're getting back to a lot of what the people actually connect and relate to, and that drew people back in, and that's why they're now doing over $1 billion in the box office from this one movie. And so
Yeah.
it really does. It may have started out that way, and I think a lot of people lie to themselves. Though I do agree with Matt. I think a lot of people lie to themselves when they say it's just fiction or it's just a fantasy. You don't realize how much this fantasy is, one, confirming your own belief system, but at the same time, it's influencing you in other areas as well, which is why I'm very watchful when it comes to series that incorporate magic, because what is it trying to tell you? What is it trying to influence? If you don't identify those things, you are subconsciously being influenced. Like music. You can say, I like the beat, but if it's talking about assaulting and killing people, that's going to feed the anger inside you, and you're going to be like, why am I mad all the time? Well, the song is all talking about angry stuff. So that's where that influence comes from. The same thing happens with movies.
Yeah, so you got a point. I would like to encourage you to use discernment. Know yourself. If you're going to rile yourself up, maybe don't do that. Like if this makes you angry, don't do that. Exercise the fruits of the spirit.
Yeah, absolutely. I can definitely attest to what both of you guys are saying in my own personal life. I know that when I was a kid, I played I like part of my reasoning for playing certain video games was that I had these anger issues and for like bullying and stuff, and I wanted a healthy outlet for that. So I played games where let's just say I had a healthy outlet for that. Where I was allowed to be this superhuman cop that could kill the criminals, but also the innocents if he felt like it. Um, um, say
Okay,
referencing
Ultron.
yeah, yeah, referencing the Crackdown games. But
Yo, I just sorry, slight
I
digression. I just played Crackdown. That was a fun game. I'm not gonna
yes,
lie.
yes,
That is a
yes,
fun game.
for sure. But collecting all those green things, addictive. But
That annoyed the
the
heck out of me. That's the only part of the game I didn't like actually, because I needed to be able to jump. So like the final. Okay, huge digression, but the
yeah,
final like area where it's the Asian gang that you have to defeat,
yeah,
and that dude is in this super duper high tower, and the only
yep,
way you can get there is when you're a certain level of jumping
agility.
distance. So I had to go back and collect the green dots in order to get to that point.
Yeah,
That annoyed me so
yeah,
much because
yeah.
I was fully maxed out on every other stat but the agility.
That's funny. But yeah, so like I can definitely say it was an escapism for me, and I would say as a kid, a healthy one, because there's a lot more unhealthy outlets I could have
Yeah,
chosen
man.
as a child to express my anger, for sure.
Mm.
So that was part of the thing, but I also know that like Spider-Man taught me something really important as a kid for when I became an adult later. Like, because with great power comes great responsibility refers to his Spider-Man abilities. But if you go listen to the monologue that his uncle gives in the Spider-Man game based on the first Tobey Maguire movie, he's talking about becoming a man.
Mm-hmm.
He's talking about adulthood.
Right.
Adulthood is the power and the responsibility that you have to handle. And
Mhm.
I mean that taught me something for sure. And then later on, of course, getting older, having these Christian beliefs, I'm watching Vampire Diaries and the two spin-offs, Legacies, and uh, and the originals.
Legacy.
I know, hot take. But I'm also watching like the Arrowverse and these other things, and we see that there are a lot of LGBTQ characters. And I don't think any of us would deny that they want you to believe that these relationship and these acts and so on are perfectly fine. I simply say, oh, I disagree. Okay, moving on. Like
Yeah,
it's
that's you
really
exercising
it's
discernment.
right.
Yeah.
It's really not that serious. I know that
Yeah.
this presentation is not going to affect me, and I know that this isn't made by Christians. So why would I expect it to agree with me anyway?
That's good.
And so I simply say, well, I disagree, but as well as with like other themes, in these shows, um, but I'm gonna enjoy it for what it's doing. Um, so yeah, I just exercising discernment and not making a big hoopla about it like Little Light Studios is doing. I really think can go a long way. Um, side big side tangent, but yeah, I think, and I also think it's important to pay attention to whether or not an idea presented in a film is good or not. I mean, I watched if you guys can stomach a almost unrated movie, and a movie that actually got banned in I believe it was South Korea for a moment. Watch I Saw the Devil. It was a 2010
Ooh,
Korean
sounds
vigilante
cool.
crime action film sort of.
Okay.
And it's very brutal, very violent.
Hmm.
There's possible
I
trigger
just
warning
finished
here.
Cyber, so my threshold for violence is kind of high.
That's fair. That's fair. But there's uh, trigger warning, but sexual violence and all of that stuff portrayed in this film, but it's not portrayed as good. The entire argument of the film is that both the horrible acts committed by this psychopath, as well as the cat and mouse game that the protagonist intentionally plays with the psychopath, just because he's enjoying dishing out his vengeance upon him, is also not good. And that point is on you're shown that very vividly, very disgustingly, rather than told that. And so you got to go into that film knowing that this a lot of bad content here. But like again, it's teaching you something good, which is actually a biblical point. Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord, I will repay. Right? Vengeance is in the domain of God, not of the covenant community. And of course, the movie's going to say not really in the domain of humans, especially those that are supposed to be in the justice system. So, it is important to know when something is teaching something and when it agrees or disagrees, and when you agree or disagree with it. But I think you can simply do that. Is simply agree or disagree with it, and then move on. Like no one's gonna watch the Black Panther film and then be like, I wonder if there really is this Panther deity that
He is
can
not letting
give me
Black Panther
superpowers. Yeah, it's not that deep. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think huge side tangent, but I think definitely all of that is very valid. And yeah, your own conscience. I know I had a friend who came out of theistic Satanism, and she could not have watched a movie like Doctor Strange. She just couldn't at the time. Anyway, not after leaving what the kind of Satanism that she was a part of, and that's
fair.
totally fair. It's totally fair. So yeah,
Good job.
I think just
Good job on her exercising discernment,
yeah,
knowing your limitations. Yeah.
for sure, for sure.
Now, once again, you'll see more biblical imagery here.
You think you're saving anyone? I turned that key and dropped this rock a little early, and it's still billions dead. Even you can't stop that. This is the best I can do. This is exactly what I wanted. All of you against all of me. How can you possibly hope to stop me?
So, interesting, right? He's literally saying, you guys against me, how do you hope to stop me? And we saw in that other previous clip that
He kind of sounds like every anime villain
Yeah.
I've ever like,
My plan has gone perfectly.
yeah, yeah,
My goodness.
right,
it's
they
like
wanted
we
to
don't watch
destroy
things.
yeah.
his image, but listen to the end of this film, what he is basically describing when he comes to destroy the world, what people are looking for. What are they doing when they're looking up in the sky in the end of the world? Listen to this verbiage.
I was meant to be beautiful. The world would have looked to the sky and seen hope, seen mercy. Instead, they'll look up in horror because of you.
So when he comes to destroy the world, people will be looking up into the sky for hope and mercy. That's the very thing that the Christian church has been longing for since the beginning of time, right? And here's the scene.
What'd you say, Matt?
No, I said that he just literally said the opposite. Like, you just tried to quote Ultron saying, I'm going to destroy the world and people will look up and be hopeful. And no, Ultron said people are going to look at me and be scared.
Yeah, they're going to look up in horror because of you, right? Again, context.
Yeah.
What was Ultron trying to say? The villain was trying to blame the heroes for how other people are perceiving a genocidal maniac.
Yeah.
Yep.
This isn't Marvel twisting our depiction of who God really is and who Jesus is and how the comings are going to work.
Yeah.
This is like Ultron gaslighting Black Widow.
Yeah.
That's kind of what it sounds like to me. And they just accept it. They're just like, "Yep, that's the gaslight. That's correct."
That's how they treat God. They treat God the same
like
way.
studios gaslighting Black Widow.
Yeah. Oh man.
In the very end, when he literally is like in a second coming pose, hovering over the world and listen.
Okay.
Second
What?
coming pose.
I'm sorry. I guess anytime I've done this entire video.
The second coming.
Second coming pose.
Wait, check his hands.
Have you done your second coming pose yet, Izzy? Have you done it for your third time today?
Check his hands. You gotta check his
Second
hands.
coming pose.
Yeah.
Keeps the Satanists away.
I got these scars in my hand that I've been developing lately. I don't know.
All
a
the
work in
lines
progress.
in his armor are whip scars. Just
Yeah.
Oh my.
I don't
wild.
like second coming pose.
Armor
How do you
with
know how?
scars.
See, what they're doing here is taking this extra biblical thought they have in their head, maybe from Christian art, about how Jesus will pose when he comes back. and
I've never
importing
seen
that
a
into
painting of,
Ultron.
but I've never even seen that. Like,
Yeah, like
what's the
I
most popular? What is the most popular work of Renaissance
it
art
usually has
showing
him out like
Jesus
this.
posing like, yeah,
It's usually
showing
like this,
Jesus
not
in a
like this.
Frieza pose?
Wait, so check it though. Like, imagine, but don't imagine. Jesus does come back, and he doesn't do that. They'll be
Then he
like,
does.
wait,
Like,
is
wait a
that
second.
really Jesus though? I don't see the second. I don't see.
I don't see the pose. I don't. Come on now.
They hold up a picture of Frieza. This is what I was expecting.
Yeah.
This doesn't look like. You can go. You can go.
That's hilarious. Oh
That's
man,
bold.
that's
I'm
that's
thinking about
funny.
that for the night.
Yeah. Oh.
Listen to what he says to the people.
Come to confess your sins.
I don't know. How much time you got?
More than you.
Have you been juicing?
This is how you end, Tony. This is peace in my time. Do you see the beauty of it? The inevitability. You rise only to fall.
Isn't this interesting? You rise only to fall, right? What's going to happen with the people at the end of the world?
We're gonna rise up.
Yeah.
And?
Not to fall.
But literally in the very end, after Satan sits there for 1,000 years thinking about what he's done, the people will be resurrected and literally get a chance to see why they weren't allowed to come to heaven, only to fall again.
Yeah.
Notice the quick side tangent before we get to the main point. Notice how crazy they are about Satan's thoughts. That they're like he's gonna sit in prison and think about what he's done. Like, what? Like, how do you know that? Not the whole 1,000 years thing that's talked about. How you interpret that is a question. But I mean he's gonna think about what he's done. Like, how do you know that, and why do you care?
Sitting on a stool facing the corner with the dunce cap on. Where did I go wrong?
Where did I go wrong? In my plan to save the world, what happened? Dastardly Michael the Archangel. But side tangent. Main point. Okay. He obviously is very aware of religion. So when I heard that phrase, I didn't think about this being like the end of the world, or the like Christian apocalypse. Basically, I thought about basically the fall and how we, Adam sort of rises from the dust, and then will fall back down to the dust, right? To dust you are, on the dust you shall return, right? That sort of idea. So I don't understand why they picked Christian eschatology when they could have just picked the fall if they just wanted to do something Christian about this. Secondly, like this like rise fall imagery is used with a lot of different religions and a lot of different things.
Right.
I just think it's the inevitability of it, right? Is even true in our own personal lives. Like both literally in some way in terms of our life and death, or falling asleep and waking up in some sense, but like also our struggle with sin, right? A sort of rising over sin and falling over sin as well. So I don't understand why, again, they picked Christian eschatology specifically, especially when he's not talking about that specifically. But he's talking about more of this like poetic idea of humans going through this constant cycle of up and down, which is, I think, valid.
You must be a better Christian than me, because I was actually thinking of Thus Spoke Zarathustra by Friedrich Nietzsche. I know we talked about this with the Superman video, but the idea of the Ubermensch. All other created things, all of humanity dies so that the Ubermensch can live. That's what I was thinking. You
Yeah,
all die. You all rise only to fall.
that's fair. He might honestly be talking about that. Um, but going back to the context of the film, it's literally what's about to happen if they
Right.
don't stop Ultron.
Yeah.
So I don't understand.
But no, so something else too, and this is more just for the fun of it, is noticing the foreshadowing of Thanos. Because if you'll notice, his left hand is bigger than his other hand, giving that imagery of the gauntlet, which we also know if you've seen the MCU animated series that they did, Ultron does get his hands on the Infinity Gauntlet. But even then, he just made that quote of inevitability, which we know Thanos says, "I am inevitable." So there is a kind of foreshadowing of the coming of Thanos. And even more so, we will notice, although he starts out by saying, "I'm just going to blip out half of existence," he goes from that to, in Endgames, "I'm just going to get rid of all of you and start afresh." And so you see that same digression with Thanos' own ideals, similar to that of Ultron's.
Now,
Yeah.
Tatario, I feel like I need to point out you said "I am," so you must.
Myself,
Yeah.
repent for my sins.
Yeah, fair point. Yeah, let's go ahead and wrap up here. We're getting close.
Right?
Yeah.
Very typical. Even he's in this Christ-like pose, looking down on the people.
No, this is not the this is not the thing. I don't understand.
It's funny. Is it a slam if it's true? Like all these parallels to the Bible, and it's painting in the light of like this is gonna happen. This is true.
It is true.
But he is
Except
the bad
at the
guy.
end, it's kind of twisted where the person who has the figure of God falls, whereas the rebellion wins, which is incorrect from the biblical standpoint.
Right.
This is what I was talking about. Ultron isn't president of the world. There's not.
I don't understand. He's not portrayed as God.
Yeah.
It's like they believed the delusions of the villain were what the film was trying to get across.
Like they believed Thanos, or not Thanos, Ultron's own PR.
Yeah, they believed his own hype. Yeah. Yeah.
They're convinced.
Yeah. It's like Vegeta believing in his own hype. Like, it's just like, yeah. Have you seen me? I'm me. And everyone around him's just like, yeah, you are you. Like,
Abridged for the win.
yeah. No, I love Abridged. Yeah, I just don't. Why would you believe that the perspective that the villain has is the correct perspective? What cues, what interpretive evidence that say do you have to support that? And you don't. They defeat the villain. They stop him from doing the thing. So I don't. And there's no philosophical conversation about nihilism or whether or not he's right and all humans deserve to die. It's just, you're wrong. We need to protect innocent life, so we're going to stop you.
Right.
This is not God coming to judge the wicked. This is a delusional person who's stepping into a realm that is God's falsely. And, we can acknowledge that. But the film does too, is the point.
Right.
So I don't understand. Last
But
little
I
bit
just
here.
find it interesting going through all of it. It's all true.
Right. You know what I mean? They're using biblical truth, but they're just flipping the characters around, who's the good guy, who's the bad guy, and they're just confusing you. But literally, they're telling you the truth of what's going on. That's why I found this so fascinating when it kind of really wrapped my head around this 10-year venture that Marvel did.
Watch this.
I used to hate children. The burn, the bumps, the plaques.
That is hilarious. I think that's a great way to end the video, honestly.
Watch this.
That's honestly a great way to end things. That is hilarious. I can't.
You need to get on to
Shaves
him.
the
How
foolishness
many
away.
times you stuck that Jesus
Yeah.
like this the whole time?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that ad is kind of funny. That ad was talking about shaving because Jesus, shaves our sins away. Or something. See, I can do this too. Okay, I can misrepresent what I'm watching too. But yeah, so
The sharp blade
that's
cutting away the bristles of sin from the face of the church.
this poetry here that you're getting at. There's definitely a poem of sorts. Yeah.
Hillsong better be sending me their contract.
Yeah. So yeah, Christians should not be watching Age of Ultron because Ultron is the villain and he's depicted as God. So they are flipping your perspective of who's God and who's not.
Facts.
Do you say facts?
Facts.
Facts, boss. Yeah. So I mean, do you guys have any final comments? I don't think we'll return for a part 3. We kind of made our point. Not particularly happy with what they did with Black Panther. I mean, I knew what was going to happen because this is I something also. Okay, I'm sorry. I need to collect my thoughts.
We're gonna go back to Black Panther after all.
Yeah, I knew what they were going to say about that film, given its sort of African mythological context, and the characters' African mythological context. Like it's fiction. I don't know if they do mention that there's a panther god in Egyptian mythology, but so I knew what they were going to do with that, and not to bring race into it, but I don't know. There's just like something that throws me off about like giving a Christian satanic panic reading of African mythology when the church in the past has unfortunately done a lot to erase a lot of what communities in Africa did in the past. Maybe that's not a super valid point. I don't know, but immediately I was just like, did you have to go there though?
Right.
Did you have to? And then they also misinterpret the whole because the panther god shows this individual where they can find this herb that they can eat that will give them superpowers, and they interpret this as similar or the same to the snake showing Eve the apple in the garden and taking it and getting superpowers, as if the tree of the knowledge of good and evil gave anyone superpowers.
Right.
It also was a fruit, not an herb. Big
Right.
difference. The panther god is not a deceiver. Big difference.
Right.
Like this is just very, very different. Again, the false equivalence thing, but and they do other stuff. There's more to the video. You guys can go watch the original video. But yeah. So final thoughts though on this venture we've went on, and I guess the big question though being how do Christians approach media? Because we can sit here and laugh at this whole separation theology, satanic panic, we need to separate from the world kind of view of secular media, but I think it would be cool to replace it with something, and I think both of you guys probably have thoughts on that. So whoever wants to go first can go. But how should we think about media that obviously isn't Christian necessarily? Or even some Christian media that includes witchcraft, like C.S. Lewis's stuff. They don't like C.S. Lewis either, unfortunately. They really don't like Lewis or Tolkien, unfortunately. They made a whole video about their stuff. But yeah.
I saw that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think the biggest
thing
is going to definitely be, discernment. I think of this in two fronts. One, and like we said earlier, and all that get understanding. I mean, what made Paul's ministry so effective was Paul didn't hesitate to understand different religious beliefs, and to go as far as to say an unknown God is actually the true and living God is a line that a lot of Christians now today, when we're talking ministry, they wouldn't be willing to cross, and they would.
The Acts 17 when he's
One that would
speaking
do
to the
something
Greeks
like that.
in Athens,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, they would lose their minds if someone tried something like that. And I think that's one of the biggest things too. At least for me, I encourage anybody that watches my content is like, I don't watch this stuff to chill only. I watch this stuff because I'm learning something, or my faith is being reinvigorated by this, or even challenged by me watching this. Full Metal Alchemist on some level challenged my faith as well as encouraged it. So it's so really about that. If people are going to engage in this, if you're not being fed, don't watch it. Like that's something I strongly hold to. At the same time, like I said earlier, not berating people who have discerned, you know what, this is not for me. There should be a respect on our part rather than an attempt to convince on our part. As an early One Piece fan, during my time with One Piece, we didn't have to try and convince people to come watch One Piece. One Piece is the greatest. No, I don't want to watch it too long. Okay. Like, we left that alone. You don't want to watch it? I'm cool with it. Now everyone has to convince people why what they do is the best thing in the world. We don't have to do that with people who don't want to watch Marvel movies, don't want to watch horror movies. They just want to watch pure flicks. By all means, enjoy pure flicks. But, and I'm going to watch pure flicks with you. Like, it's kind of like that.
Yeah, don't kind of applying the Romans of, I believe it's 14, principle of, if it's wrong in your conscience, then it's wrong.
Yes.
So, if you don't want to watch Deadpool and Wolverine, that's fine. If you don't want to watch Black Panther or these other things, that's fine. Again, what we want, they made a video they have over 2,000 200,000 subscribers. Now, they made a video for a wide array, for a huge audience, and this video has over 600,000 views now. They made a video very public for a wide range of people to argue why Marvel is Satan's endgame and you shouldn't watch it. And that's an interpretation. And what we're trying to argue is that's flawed. Not that you can't decide as an adult or as a Christian who can think, not to watch certain things.
Yes.
So that's definitely a thing. I know, for example, I know you pointed this out on one of your, or like you mentioned, kind of a warning in the content, Kentario, when you talk about some media that has like lustful content in it and stuff like that.
Yes.
Like you'll do that because and I've seen some of your videos where you say like, I don't think, unless you can handle this kind of stuff, you should be looking at this, right? Just kind of using wisdom, saying we don't want to fall into sin.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's definitely valid there as well.
It's like that dumb thing we hear. I don't know if he'll get you banned for saying his name, so I'll say Bandrew Bate likes to say kings had several wives back in the Bible. Look, just because Solomon had 700 wives.
Yeah, that doesn't. Yeah.
World,
oh man.
Status of
yeah,
seven.
his.
What that means.
Yeah, we could do a whole thing just talking about his biblical interpretation. Yeah. So Matt, if you have any thoughts on how Christians can digest and think about media, I'm here for it.
Yeah. So I think a great way to think about, especially more like mature media, is to reflect upon yourself after watching it. Like I mentioned that I have a high threshold for violence, like kind of jokingly in reference to the fact that I've just finished a very brutal, very dark anime called Genocyber. I don't recommend Genocyber. It's intense. But when I watch Genocyber, I come away with the understanding of a very cynical view of the advancement of technology. Like if you watch Akira, Genocyber, and Ghost in the Shell, it will make you into a Luddite. Especially if you watch those back to back, you will just want to give up technology completely. But if you're seeking out Genocyber because you want to be aroused, or if you're seeking out another one of my favorite franchises, Berserk, I don't like Genocyber, but I love Berserk. If you're seeking out Berserk to be aroused, then that's when you have to have the honest conversation with yourself and say, no, I can't pursue this. This is a temptation for me. If you're seeking out Conan for the same reason, then you don't get to seek out Conan. I'm sorry, you don't get to do it because that's a temptation for you. Like even the most benign thing, if Little Eye Studios is this triggered by the Marvel Cinematic Universe, they probably shouldn't be watching Marvel films.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No, that is
like,
crazy that they
yeah,
watched these films hard to come up with this
right, exactly.
video. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, but if what you consume brings you to at least maybe a neutral response, like, yeah, I watched that, that was nice, I'm rested, I can go back to whatever work I was doing, then like that's okay. You can enjoy media, you can enjoy entertainment.
Right.
If you watch something and it gets you thinking about things that are not like bad, like honestly Berserk for me, like thinking about the role that destiny plays with human free will, like that's a I like the way Berserk handles it.
Mhm.
And it's great that it's also highly action. I'm saying it mildly, but it's very,
Yeah.
very action packed.
Yeah. Yeah.
And to be fair, Matt, too, like you said, look within yourself. If you're looking at Berserk to be aroused, where majority of any instance where anything like that happens, except maybe one between Casca and Guts, there's something wrong with you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
No,
that would be my
that's a
point
fair
with
point
Berserk.
too.
Is the
Most of the
nudity in
instances where it
Berserk?
comes up are in context of like violence or awkward context even.
Yeah, like if you're aroused by the nudity in Berserk, then you need like therapeutic help.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
no, that's fair. I remember I actually like on that exact point, I remember I was at my brother's house, my parents were there, and we were watching I might have chosen the movie. We were watching the third Berserk movie because I wanted my dad to see like the first one. I wanted to see like the first one to see like the action and stuff in it and the story, and he was like, "Okay, well, I'm interested." So we got to the third one, and I remember being like, "Oh, oh," and I was most definitely not excited, but I also didn't know what to do with what I was looking at. So, it was rough. It did like disturb my faith or like do anything negative to me because obviously this is a horrific context this is happening in, and just like reading Judges 19, we just read Judges 19 for class, guys. Listen. But like so it's kind of like that to me. But yeah, so I definitely remember. So I can definitely vouch for both of you guys. Don't come to Berserk thinking it's like the Song of Solomon.
Well, don't approach Berserk that way. If you know
Yeah.
within yourself that you're approaching Berserk in that way, don't pursue Berserk. If you know you're approaching Akira in that way, don't pursue Akira. If you're approaching any given thing, no matter how many accolades it gets, no matter how many people say it's the best thing ever, and you know within yourself that you're not going to take it the right way, then don't do it. I mean, that sounds so simplistic and it sounds like not dynamic, but that's just the truth. Like, it's spiritual discipline. Sometimes spiritual discipline isn't like cherubs descending, playing the trumpet of God so that you don't, that it isn't called attention to yourself. Sometimes it's just the little decisions you make over a long period of time. It's just, I'm not going to do it this time. I'm not going to do it this time. I'm not going to do it this time. And then it becomes a habit. Yeah.
And virtue, so there's this, and I've argued for this. I would consider myself a Christian virtue ethicist, which virtue ethics, in short, just means that the goal of life is to pursue excellent moral character. Like we should incline towards the building of character rather than just the following of rules, the pursuit of pleasure, or noticing the consequences of our actions. Christian virtue ethics wants to say our purpose is union with God through the virtues. So our purpose, our meaning, our happiness in the virtue ethics sense, which is really a state of being, is union with God, and virtue and demonstrating virtue is a way to get there. It's a whole thing. But one of the things that's important in virtue ethics is wisdom. Like in virtue ethics, it's typically said you don't need to be told what to do. You should have the wisdom to know what to do in a context. You should not it's not always the case that you need a direct divine command or you need a law. It should be obvious, maybe not obvious, but discernible to a wise person how to act virtuously in a certain context. So wisdom becomes really important. And of course, in Christian ethics, and in Christian understanding, Jesus is it's himself the wisdom of God, the divine logos, and so that plays a part into all of that. But so to apply what you're saying, though, yeah, you need to have the wisdom necessary to decide for yourself if an action is going to be right or wrong in a context. And one of the ways that virtue ethicists talk about building character is through habits. And so you increase in your character by building habits that will do so for you. This and for Christians, this can be going to church consistently. This can be praying consistently and reading your scriptures and doing all these sorts of things. So yeah, that point being, that's a model of Christian virtue ethics. I encourage people to look into it. I think Paul and others taught it is a model by which we can, I think, view these things. A second point to make too, I think, in relation to that is that sometimes media builds your character. It doesn't have to destroy it. It doesn't have to do something damaging to it. I and I mentioned this before in maybe in our post video discussion, but like I cried when I saw Vegeta do that sacrifice in Dragon Ball Z and in the Buu saga, and I had to ask myself questions like, he had been redeemed to a point to where he could do something like that, and personal reflection, like, could you do something like that? Would you sacrifice yourself for the greater good? Would you be as Jesus was and love, as Paul says, Christ loved the church, or husbands love you wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. Like, would you be willing to give yourself up for someone else that you love for a greater good, for a greater cause, that sort of thing, and demonstrate your character through that. So it can be challenging. It can also build character, I think, if you consume media well. I talked about this in a video, but I think again, bringing up Vampire Diaries, has some Christian values, because the whole discussion towards particularly towards the end, although it's kind of always there because of Damon, the discussion becomes, particularly because of Damon, the discussion becomes, can you be redeemed? Like, Damon does horrible things. Like in the first few episodes of the first season, he's already gaslighting, manipulating, and abusing a minor when he's like 100-something years old, and older than his brother when he became a vampire. Right, he was already, I think, 18 or older. He does a lot of horrible things, but the show portrays him as redeemed at the end because he makes the sacrifice. He grows in character. He finds people he loves, and would be willing to become a better person for them. And so that's the whole thing. But point is, has Christian values.
We'll have to do a whole video on Vampire Diaries.
Yeah.
We need to do a whole video on Berserk. We need to do the whole video on Berserk.
Yeah.
Yes, we do. We do.
That would be interesting. So, big picture, use discernment, use the wisdom that you have to figure out what might hurt your character, what might help you in your character, your relationship with God. I would just say be willing to just use a biblical lens, a biblical ethical lens, and say, okay, I disagree with this media, or hey, I agree with this media. And also just recognize that not everything that's portrayed in the media is trying to tell you choose about the objective reality of the real world. Like, just making that distinction could be incredibly helpful. Because then you can put everything you see in media into a category of, okay, I know that's not real. Don't have to worry about it. I don't have to be scared, when I go to bed that a demon's going to come do something to me because I know The Exorcist is a fictional film. Right, those sorts of things. So, yeah, the distinction between just fiction and reality, but also discernment and using your wisdom to hash those things out, I think would be really important. And even inclining yourself to media that could challenge your faith or help grow your faith in your character. I would consider it wrong under my ethical theory, for example, for Little Light Studios to tell a Christian not to watch Vegeta's sacrifice and all the events leading up to it, because I think it has some parallels to Jesus and could really bring out that Christ-like imagery and really challenge the character of the person to help them grow. And so, yeah. Real quick, any other thoughts before we close, or would you say those kinds of ideas would pretty much wrap everything up?
I'll hit you up in the group.
Okay, yeah. We could definitely do something on Berserk in the future. That would be interesting. I just, I remember, man, the first time I watched those 3 movies, I was like, this is insanity. Like, it gets wild.
Beautiful. It was beautiful.
Let's go. Yeah. But yeah, thank you guys so much for joining me for this series. I'm glad we were able to kind of talk about all these issues, because they are important issues, right? How do we, as Christians, think about these things in a world, especially where we're surrounded by it all the time. At any point in time, you could abandon your responsibilities and to Netflix and chill, right? You know what I mean? You know what I mean? So these things are always at our fingertips now in our age. So it's important to think about it. And so I think that's fair. So yeah, thank you for joining me on this journey. Thank you guys so much for watching. I would encourage you to subscribe, to check out the content of these creators. If their links are in the description, I will definitely make sure to put them there. I'll also put timestamps in the comments for people to move across the video. But check out Christ. If you have TikTok, check out Christ X Comments on TikTok and Matt Starr on there as well. Facebook, I think you're Kentario on Facebook and Matt Starr on Facebook. Is that correct? Yep. So definitely check
I'm
those
also
guys
on
out.
Instagram for the millennials out there.
Yes, yes. So check them out on Instagram. They're Christians. We're Christians. We're nerds. So you'll see all that kind of content coming from us. So, yep. So thank you